We have Congressman Jesús Chuy García on the show today. Congressman, welcome to the Paseo podcast. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Josh. I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I've been engaging the Puerto Rican Boricua community since I was in college, actually, maybe a little bit before that. And of course, I'm married into the family. I have 3 children and, of course, 7 grandchildren. So we're part of the tapestry.
For people that are listening outside of Chicago that may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself. What should our audience know about you?
I came to Chicago in 1965. I was turning 10 years old. I grew up in only 2 barrios, the Pilsen community, and then as it expanded westward, Little Village. I identify as a community activist. Always been passionate about what's going on in my neighborhood, in the greater neighborhood, across town. I believe in Latino unity, Latino panism. I strive for social justice. And since I began getting involved in politics, I've always identified as a progressive independent Democrat. Even today in Congress, that characterization and fighter for social justice still applies.
We normally ask our guests what part of Puerto Rico they're from, but I'm going to switch it up. What part of Mexico is your family from?
I'm from the northern state of Mexico, the state of Durango. It's where Pancho Villa comes from. So we have someone quite famous who hails from that state, one of our most important revolutionaries in Mexican history. My father came here in the late 40s, part of the Bracero program. We reunited with him in 1965 after my mother and my 3 siblings and I got our green cards and came to the United States directly to Chicago in February in the middle of a snowstorm. That was my homecoming to Chicago.
So let's talk about a little bit about your district, just to give people a sense of geography. So you are a congressman out of Illinois, the great state of Illinois. What is the geography of your district? What does that encompass?
So the district is essentially 3 areas. The northwest side that comprises, the Paseo Boricua going into Hermosa, further north into Albany Park. So that whole concentration of Latinos on the northwest side. And then we go into the suburban communities, starting in Elmwood Park, going out to Stone Park and Melrose Park, and then looping back around North Riverside, Berwyn, and Cicero. So there's that southwest suburban community. And then, of course, the greater southwest side of the city of Chicago. This is the historical home of yours truly. There's an estimated population of about 735,000 people in this area. It's a Latino majority district. Aside from Mexicanos and Boricuas, there are other Latin Americans, especially from Central America. And then there are also sprinklings of German, Irish, German, and Polish immigrants in the district as well. There are about 55,000 Boricuas who live in my district, including the one at home here.
Man,
my better half.
That's super diverse. How do you how do you balance that coming from Mexican culture, like dealing with the different nuances and demographics? Like I think a lot of people, when they think about electing someone to office, they're looking for someone that looks like them, that has those shared cultural experiences. For people that you represent that aren't Mexicano or aren't Latino, like how do you give space to listen to those needs and to adequately serve those constituents?
So the underlying characteristic of the people of the 4th District is overwhelmingly their working class. So issues of minimum wage and the quality of work, schools and the resources that schools have to educate our children and building educational communities throughout the district are some of the things that people care about. The district is also very progressive. It supports increasing the minimum wage. It supports Medicare for all. It has a very progressive thrust and bent to it. So representing the district is quite an honor. Everywhere I've gone in the district, I've felt welcome. People are ready to talk issues, and I get mail and calls and all kinds of communications from throughout the district. It's a great district to represent. It is one of the most progressive districts in the country. And it also is one of the youngest. We have among the largest population of young people anywhere in the country. So in many respects, it's a microcosm of the country and of the future of the country. And of course, the large Latino majority in the district, it's about 67% Latino, makes it a fantastic district, of course, and its people to represent in Washington, D.C.
I'm really glad when you answered that question, you started off with working class people. It reminds me, you know, I had asked the question through the lens of like culture, ethnicity. So like for you to answer with putting first and foremost working class people, I think that's, for people listening, you know, I think that's a really good mentality to have. Like looking at race and ethnicity, while important, you know, we have to look at policy from a class issue. And it reminds me of like Martin Luther King and Poor People's Campaign, you know, really bringing together working class people, talking about the importance of unions. Like that's when like fear really set in for his detractors, when he was bringing people across the spectrum of identity and background to kind of organize under one banner. Also reminds me of Rainbow Coalition. It reminds me of, you know, organizing here in Chicago. And I'm gonna connect this, I promise you, with my next question, because you were brought in into elected office through a coalition. A lot of people point to that wave of elected officials from the Harold Washington campaign that brought in people like yourself and Luis Gutierrez. And like kind of fast forwarding to today, specifically focusing on you and Luis Gutierrez, the former congressman that was representing your district before. I was reading this in these Times article, and they referred to Luis as the MOK of Latinos, which I thought was an interesting tagline. And it kind of sets the bar kind of high for another Latino stepping into that district to represent it. So, I mean, can you give us a little like breakdown, like what was it like stepping into this role that was held by someone like Luis Gutierrez, because he was in the world, he held that seat for a number of terms.
26 years that Luis served in the U.S. Congress, and of course he earned a reputation of being a fearless fighter, especially for immigrants. Mm-hmm. So Luis and I have a long history because we both ran for office together, going back to 1984 when we both ran for committeeman. He ran against Dan Rostenkowski in that part of the district. And we were elected together to the city council. We helped give Harold Washington a majority and to break the deadlock of the white obstructionist bloc that was hindering his administration at the 3-year mark, almost 3/4 of a term into his mayoralty. So we have a lot in common. We've been great friends. We have fought many battles together. We work very closely in the Chicago City Council. I think Harold Washington had a great place in his heart for us and the difference that we made. And we truly, I think, through our victories came to embody what coalition is like in Chicago, bringing together the two largest ethnic groups, the African-American and Latino communities, banding together with progressive whites, with women's movements, with the LGBTQ community. We voted together on Chicago's first and historic human rights ordinance to protect people in the LGBT community against discrimination. And of course, we've always had a close relationship with respect to Puerto Rico, the diaspora across the country. And of course, it goes without saying, a family. Both of us are married to Boricuas. The difference is that I am Mexicano. but we've had this great relationship. So being the successor to someone who served in the Congress for that long was actually pretty seamless and a great experience. As you know, Luis came to decide that it was time to move on, with a short time before the filing deadline. He endorsed me enthusiastically. We announced my run together. And of course, I was able to receive the support overwhelmingly of people throughout the district. And of course, many elected officials, many community activists, because of our common history of fighting for good causes for many, many years. So I feel privileged to have been his successor. We continue to have a great relationship. We are in touch about issues on the island and across the country in the Puerto Rican diaspora. And of course, we also share very closely our commitment to advancing the immigrant community, Pan-Latinoism, and a sense of building coalitions at the national level as well. So I'm proud to call him my friend. We chat very frequently, on issues, on goings-on, sometimes on the bochinche that's happening in the community or on the island as well. I have to confess, we have a great relationship. So I'm truly honored to have been his successor in the U.S. Congress, and I received great support from Boricuas throughout the Northwest Side and other parts of the district as well.
First off, I'm glad you worked in a bochinche there. I thought you were going to say chisme. So I appreciate that. And just looking at the relationship that you and Luis have, it reminds me of this saying that I heard for the first time on Paseo Boricua, which is Boricua y Mexicano luchando mano y mano. And, speaking of luchando, fighting, looking at your decision to run for Congress and looking at your mayoral campaign when you ran against the former mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, when he was seeking a second term, you had two big options in front of you. You could have run again to become Chicago's mayor, or you could have run for Congress. What went into your decision to say, you know what, I'm going to campaign to represent people in Illinois at the federal level? What went into that decision?
First of all, Donald Trump had been president for nearly 2 years. It was a disastrous administration. The attacks against the Mexican community, against immigrants, against everything Latino, and seeking to make us the scapegoats of problems and challenges the country was facing, was a great motivator. I had a sense that Democrats could win a majority in 2018 and that we could change the course of the country's history and that it would be a part of building for a big win in 2020. And of course, all of that has happened. Luis was also, thinking about his life and his service to the 4th District over a 26-year period. And he felt that this was the right timing. So it made lots of sense to be able to run for the office, to run on a coalition banner, and of course, to advance a very progressive agenda as to why I wanted to be a congressman of the 4th District. The bread and butter issues of raising the minimum wage, of Medicare for all, of doing an infrastructure bill, of rebuilding Puerto Rico in the wake of the hurricanes and other natural disasters made a lot of sense. And that's what was going on at that time. I feel that I'm very fortunate to be the congressman for the past 2+ years during a time where we experienced government shutdowns, where we had to impeach Donald Trump not only once, but twice, and where we were able to win the Senate and the White House at the same time, and to stand in the throes of history right now with the potential to bring about great policy changes that will truly help the people of our country in the middle of a pandemic. And of course, with a positioning that we can be a transformative Congress in concert with the White House, and that the policies that we enact in these times will have profound consequences, good consequences for the children and grandchildren of our generation. So I'm excited to be addressing the issues of education and health and nutrition and shelter and housing, and of course the committees that I'm on in Congress. But that was the environment that led to my decision that this is something I was excited to do. And of course, I feel that even though I've only been in Congress for 2 years, I feel like a seasoned veteran, and I feel like I've been in Congress for at least a decade with everything that has gone on.
No, I bet. I'm sure a month feels like a year, and the way our politics works nowadays.
Absolutely.
You brought up Donald Trump. I mean, I think people listening to this show are very familiar with his outlook and his administration's outlook on Puerto Rico and the people that inhabit and live on that island. So looking at the Trump administration's outlook on Puerto Rico, even, I mean, previous president administrations, the relationship between the United States and Puerto Rico, for lack of a better term or phrasing, leaves a lot to be desired. In my opinion. And I think there's a lot that the United States, a lot that can be improved in that relationship between the United States and Puerto Rico. So I did want to, I know you have your hands in a number of things in Congress right now, but I wanted to focus this episode, since we highlight Puerto Rican stories, to really focus on policy, legislation that's kind of in the works right now at the federal level that you could shed some light on for our listeners. So before we started recording, I told you I really want to approach our conversation like myself as a student, you as a teacher. We're going to go through some of these rapid fire because I know we don't have a lot of time. But
sure.
like I said, you have your hands in a number of things in Congress right now in the House of Representatives. You're on the Natural Resources Committee, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. You're on the Financial Services Committee, all demanding a lot of your time. I want to focus specifically on the Natural Resources Committee and how that relates to Puerto Rico. Could you explain what is the Natural Resources Committee that you're the vice chair of, and what authority or power does it have on Puerto Rico?
Absolutely. So first, I'm very happy to have been elected vice chair of the Natural Resources Committee just 2 weeks ago. The committee has jurisdiction over issues regarding environmental justice, indigenous people, and the jurisdiction over policy regarding Puerto Rico and other territories. Just last week, during the committee hearing, for example, I submitted a formal concern from the Salvemos Jauca Beach Committee and other community members, including Representative Gutierrez, about concerns that the building of a new hotel in that part of the island is going to prevent people from accessing the beach and the natural resources that the island should have access to. Later this month, the committee, for example, is going to have a hearing titled Building Back Better in the U.S. Territories. Here, we're going to be talking about the money that Congress appropriated for the reconstruction of Puerto Rico, for the infrastructure, for the housing, all of the other needs, the clinic in Vieques that was destroyed by Hurricane Maria that hasn't been rebuilt. All of these issues are critical to the future of Puerto Rico, to building an infrastructure that's resilient, that takes into account the assets of the island, that should be done for the benefit of the people. And that is one of the biggest priorities that we are going to be undertaking. We want to make sure that the almost $18 billion that were approved by the U.S. Congress actually reach the mayors and the municipalities and the people, and that everything from the electrical power system on the island is rebuilt, and rebuilt with an eye towards sustainability and the future so that it doesn't happen again. The committee has power over Puerto Rico, speaking, over control of everything regarding the island, including, for example, the Promesa bill, the board, the junta that was appointed, the conflicts of interest on that board, and of course, the huge debt that the island has been saddled with by Wall Street interests who are seeking to, indebt the population of Boricuas on the island for such a long time that essentially would prevent the economy from ever recovering and becoming a sustainable economy for the people of Puerto Rico, and even to attract additional investment onto the island. So we are working to ensure that there is a community-driven recovery process for Puerto Rico, that civil society and not just politicians and bureaucrats make those decisions. And we're also dealing with the self-determination of the island in the future, keeping all of the political options front and center for the people that they should drive and that they should engage in. So we deal with so many aspects of Puerto Rican life and society on this committee. And that's why I work hard to get on the committee and feel very rewarded to now be the vice chairman of that committee, along with our chairman, Raul Grijalva, another ally and someone who also supports the Puerto Rican people in improving their lot.
You mentioned, you mentioned La Junta, but I want to get to that in a second. Looking at another act in Congress, I just want some clarity. I know you've mentioned the Community-Driven Recovery for Puerto Rico Act. Is that related at all to your work on the Natural Resources Committee and Build Back Better plan, or is that something different?
They're connected.
Okay.
We're talking about money that's been allocated already for Puerto Rico and its reconstruction, money that was held up by Donald Trump with a capricho, a vendetta against seeing the island receive the money that Congress appropriated. And that's the power of Congress and the will of Congress. He blocked those resources from reaching the island. We want transparency. We want accounting. We want the money to go to the purposes that it was designated. The Build Back Better is one more additional opportunity to ensure the viability and the rebuilding of the island and the prospering of the island in the future. We want to make sure that we're paying attention to all of these issues. A case in point of what's possible for Puerto Rico in the Rescue Act that we approved last week in Congress and that the president signed toward the end of the week. We've changed the reimbursement rate for Medicaid reimbursement on the island so that the reimbursement rates are what the states receive here in the mainland, so that the people on the island are not shortchanged as it relates to resources for healthcare. That's the type of equity that we are seeking to bring to the island and its governance. So when we talk about Build Back Better, we're talking about what economic stimulus, what economic development endeavors we ought to be undertaking to ensure that people in Puerto Rico have the opportunity to work, to study, and to enjoy their life as they rebuild the island with an eye toward sustainability and not simply build it back the way that experts on the mainland or bureaucrats think it ought to be rebuilt, but to consult with actors in the grassroots throughout the island and have that plan emanate from the bottom up and to ensure the best stewardship of the resources that will be invested in the reconstruction of the island.
You mentioned La Junta in your earlier response, and I know we're going rapid fire here, but just curious to hear from you. I mean, I know you're no stranger to criticizing the Fiscal Oversight Management Board. What are you currently involved in to get rid of the Fiscal Control Board?
Well, the Fiscal Control Board has imposed all sorts of cuts and services on everything from pensions to many other austerity measures on the people of Puerto Rico. I happen to think that paying off that debt is totally unreasonable and unrealistic if we want to see the island prosper again in the future. Bondholders have been driving this agenda. Wall Street has had immense say over the creation of the board, the administration of the board, and of course the imposition of these debt obligations. I don't think that they're sustainable. We've got to continue to exert ourselves to ensure that there is transparency, that we eliminate any conflicts of interest, and then reckon with the question about whether or not these debts are payable or if they should be canceled or forgiven if the island is to have any chance of getting back on its feet and seeing an economy that's going to be thriving, putting people back to work, and providing the essential services that people on the island need, from healthcare to education to their ability to retire and have pensions to enjoy in the golden years of their lives. And what we're saying is that critical stakeholders in civil society should include community leaders, neighborhood organizations, local nonprofits, unions, small businesses in Puerto Rico to oversee the federal relief efforts. And of course, this idea about building back better should also be done in consultation with those actors in Puerto Rican society. We've been working with the Puerto Rican Agenda here in Chicago, with the Puerto Rican Cultural Center on the island, with organizations like Oxfam and many policy experts on the island to really explore what are the best ways that reconstruction of the island should be about.
There's two current acts right now in Congress that are hoping to address Puerto Rico's status issue. Why did you choose to support the PR Self-Determination Act as opposed to the Puerto Rico Statehood Admissions Act?
For quite a few decades, I've watched with great interest and as an observer the plebiscites that have been held on the island since the 50s. And none of those plebiscites, in my opinion, have had the standing, the credibility, or have created the consensus to convince people on the island or in Congress to move forward. As a matter of fact, none of those plebiscites have ever had the backing of the U.S. Department of Justice. The Puerto Rico Self-Determination Act, introduced by Representatives Velázquez of New York and Ocasio-Cortez of New York, which I am going to support, would essentially provide for the election of state convention delegates to participate in such a process that would pose the questions of political options for the island. It doesn't predetermine either statehood or Estado Libre Asociado or independence. It keeps all of those options open, including the possibility of new options that people have begun to put forth. We believe that a permanent negotiating committee would be in place that would keep all of these options viable before a vote of any kind takes place. These are the steps that have never been taken with respect to a plebiscite. And again, it doesn't rule out any of the political options that the people of Puerto Rico would have the opportunity to chime in on what the future should be. We just think that it would have more consultation, more credibility and standing, and that would probably result in a larger participation, more democratic with a small d participation of Boricuas on the island in deciding the future fate and status of Puerto Rico.
Super happy to see you being in support of a more what seems to be a more democratic process with the PR Self-Determination Act. I did want to talk a little bit about, and as we wrap up our time together, shifting gears away from legislation in Puerto Rico and more towards like the future of the Democratic Party. I was reading an In These Times article that was an article about you actually, and they had mentioned how you had some thoughts, a little bit of pushback on this idea from many centrist Democrats that embracing bold progressive stances cost Democratic seats in the past election this past November. Can you expand a little bit why you disagree with statements like that?
Two Democrats, when we were trying to figure out what all happened and what led to the loss of a number of seats in our majority, Democratic majority in the House, some centrist Democrats put forth the proposition that we had lost seats because members were running and holding up, defunding the police and cozying up to socialist policies as the reason for those losses. I don't know one member of Congress who ran on such a platform. We ran on very specific things and policy proposals that we continue to fight for in the U.S. Congress. So my position was that you can't make those assumptions without unpacking all of the factors that were at play in these elections. So I said that they were mistaken in their assumptions. We had not gone through an evaluation process. We still haven't. We are going through such a process to objectively understand what happened. But I think that if we continue to deliver on the types of things that working people need in our country, like the Biden rescue plan, that people are going to respond very concretely because they're seeing a change in their lives. Through this bill alone, for example, we're going to reduce poverty by about 1/3. We're going to cut child poverty almost by half. Once people see and experience what living out of poverty is going to be like, I think it's going to draw a lot more support for those policies. And I think as we undertake our work in a Build Back Better plan, also known as an infrastructure bill, those are the types of initiatives that are going to bring opportunities to people to have good jobs, to participate in job training programs, rebuild our infrastructure, get rid of the leaded piping that is still delivers water to too many houses and even public schools in our city and in our other municipalities across the metro region. Cities and states don't have the funding to do this. The federal government can. And what we do is we address problems that are large, that can put many people to work, that can demonstrate good progress, like new housing, better transit, new jobs being created, installing broadband so that people both in cities and in rural areas have access and connectivity to the rest of the world. Those are the kinds of things that the American people want. And I believe that as we undertake those types of policies, that will help us reduce the amount of political polarization, the attacks of misinformation and distortion of realities, and the types of polarization that gave us the events of January 6th, the despicable events of January 6th, that were assembled and led by Donald Trump, the biggest threat to democracy that our country has experienced since the War of 1812, including the Civil War in our country. So when we talk about policies that make a difference in people's lives, I think the American people will respond. And that's how we can get to a better place where there's more civility, where people trust information, and where people are paying attention to objective facts and not alternative facts, and how we can reestablish trust and a credible democratic debate about our future.
Looking at the future of the Democratic Party, a lot of people will point to the squad members as being the future of the party. Not everybody, but a good portion of people. How would you define your relationship with the squad in Congress? Of course, that's represented by Ayanna Pressley, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Jamal Bowman. That group is growing. I mean, do you consider yourself as part of the squad? And if not, why not?
They're my allies. They're who I caucus with. They're some of the people that I have the closest relationships in Congress. And I think they also represent the future. They are the force that is reviving democracy, that is giving young people a reason to get involved politically, to come out and vote, to take leadership positions in their communities, and yes, to run for office as well. That's the future. And that's what I've been focusing on here in the Chicagoland area, city and suburbs over the past 5 years, building that bench of progressive leaders, building their skill sets, exposing them to political action and political activism. They all don't have to run for office or be politicians, but they can have skill sets about public policy, about how to run campaigns, how to run strategic thinking and movements, and be the leaders in nonprofit organizations as well. So I consider them my allies. I am an unabashed progressive. I am a little more seasoned only because of my age and my experience. They let me hang with them. They are my allies. I love them. And of course, we have much in common because most of the legislation that we advance and vote on in the U.S. Congress, all of us vote to a great degree, almost in unison.
That's really interesting because I'll admit, when I was seeing a lot of the squad get headlines, I was like, man, where's Chuy at?
We're growing the bench and we're doing the work. And the trust and the relationships are there. So
good.
I'm a part of that team without doubt.
I just wanted to end on a lighter note. We ask all of our guests what they're obsessed with. What are you obsessed with right now? And you can't say public service. That's cheating. So unrelated.
No. I live a real life. I love jazz. I love Latin jazz music. From the Caribbean, from Mexico, from Central and South America. That's what I'm obsessed with it. Every chance that I get, I tune in. I support public radio. I'm one of the owners of those radio stations because I send my little contribution in. But I'm also a runner. An enthusiastic runner. I'd like to think that it's changed my life almost 10 years ago. I ran 3 Chicago marathons. I can't run forever. So I'm also transitioning to become a better gardener. Many people who will see, this podcast are going to recognize that in my little patch in my backyard, I spend a lot of time cultivating everything from tomatoes and chiles, to berenjena, eggplant, a variety of vegetables that we grow in the backyard. And then, of course, I learned from my mom, from my wife and other friends, try to delve into cooking. So how catch me making pasteles, or tamales. And I plan to focus in and refine my coquito making skills as well. So I love spending time at home with family and friends. And we're going to try to show off and polish off some of our acquired recent abilities and share them with everyone so that everyone partakes a little bit more and overcomes any phobias that they may have about cooking or gardening or things like that. One, make it a little easier. And you always do that, I think, when you have some fun with it and always music in the background.
Quick bonus question. This is a listener question. I saved it for the end because I think it's a little ridiculous, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And you've probably been asked this so many millions of times. Pero, you are known for that stash. Congressman. Like, that is like, I have a shirt that has your mustache on it. Not even your face, just your name and the mustache, and people know, right? Especially here in Chicago.
Yeah. Yes.
Are we ever going to see you with a beard? Like, is it, you've had that stash for so long. I mean, why the stash over the beard? Beards are in.
Well, look, I haven't shaved my mustache since I was 14 years old. I've trimmed it. I only trim it. I mean, I'm very ethical about this, only with small tijeras, with the small scissors, and I take good care of it. It's my signature. Okay. If I shaved my mustache or shaved accidentally too much of it, people would not recognize me. So it's my existence, and I take really good care of it. The beard thing, I tried it when I was younger. It wasn't what I thought it would be. You know, not everyone can grow a good-looking beard. So mine was not to my liking. It was kind of scraggly. So I stopped trying, and I stuck with what worked, and the stash has worked pretty well for me.
All right. No, it has. It's definitely paid off. Do you use anything in the mustache to keep it like smooth or anything? You said you trim it, but do you put any like beard oil or anything in there? No?
No, it doesn't. It hasn't asked for anything. I probably put a little cream on it because it comes off, right? To keep my skin a little bit moist. But other than that, nothing special. And it's been a great ally.
I can only dream to have a stash like that. Okay, Congressman, you've been super generous with your time. How can people keep up with you after this episode?
Absolutely. So if you want to get on my Twitter account, just go to Rep. Chuy García, and my email address is chuygarcia.house.gov. Again, chuygarcia.house.gov. And again, my Twitter handle is @Rep. Chuy García. Look forward to hearing from folks.
All right, Congressman Jesús Chuy García. Gracias for being on the Paseo podcast today. Appreciated having you on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.